And thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Buckchester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we are going to talk with author Ken Holly about his book, An Ordinary Guy. Now, you know what I'm going to tell you to do. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee, or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Good morning, Ken. Thank you so much for being on the call with me today.
Good morning, Doctor. Thanks for having me on your radio program.
I love it. Now, before we talk about your book, there may be some listeners who are not familiar with you. If you could please, can you take a moment to introduce yourself to them? What makes Ken Holly Ken?
Well, I guess I'm on the leading edge of the baby boomers there. I was born in September of 1946, so I grew up in the 50s and the early 60s. The couple years after I graduated from high school, which was back in '64, I went into the Navy for 4 years, and then after getting out of the Navy, you know, I started working full time and going to school at night to finish up my degree, and I married my wife in 1979, and we had two daughters, and I ended up working until September of 2011 when I retired, and I've really enjoyed the retirement.
Well, you know, I have a fondness for the baby boomer generation. My parents are in the baby boomer generation, so you guys are all right with me. So I think most people will agree. So that is awesome. And, you know, I have to admit that I love the work ethic that the baby boomer generation has instilled in the Gen Xer, who is my generation. You know, it's like, get up and make it happen. So I think there are some really good things that you guys have passed along. Now, about being an author, is that something that you always wanted to do, or did you find that it was just the next logical step for your life?
Well, I didn't start out, you know, wanting to write a book. But I had several things that contributed to my decision to write the book. After my parents and my wife's parents passed away, which was in the last one being in July of 2009, my wife and I realized that we didn't have anything written about their lives, just what they had told us. I also used to tell stories at night to our two daughters to get them to relax and get them all to sleep, and sometimes I would use this as a learning session, and sometimes I would tell them age-appropriate stories about my life. After I decided to retire in September 2011, I decided to document some of those stories for the girls. I never intended to write a book, but a lady by the name of Kim, who I had only talked to 3 times in my life at that point, told me I should write a book and write it in my own words. Don't let somebody polish it up. But, you know, I remember telling her, yeah, I'm an electronic guy. I can't even spell. But she reiterated, she kind of laughed too, but she reiterated and said I should write it, said people will like it. So anyway, the rest is history.
You know, I love that. So some of the best stories that we have ever read, the best books we ever get our hands on, are of the people who are the unexpected authors. You know, the ones who it wasn't necessarily their life goal to become an author, but enough people would say, you need to share this. This is great info, and you should share this with the rest of us. So I am so glad that she inspired you to be able to go on and put it down for us to be able to read. Now, how long did it take you to actually complete? Like, when you were writing, did you find that you said, my goal is to get this done in a specific amount of time? Were you, or did you say, I'm just going to write until I'm done? And then how long did it take for you to actually complete the book?
Oh, okay. Well, I started making notes, you know, because things would trigger memories. And I started making notes in late 2011 and early 2012. And then I started kind of assembling the notes I had at the time there in mid-late 2012. And then I finally published the book in 2013. I remember how I always carry note paper and a pen everywhere I went. So if something triggered a memory, I could write it down. And I know about that time period. I about drove my wife buggers because we'd be driving somewhere, and all of a sudden I would think of something, and I'd pull out my note paper and shove it over in front of her face and give her my pen and say, "Make a note quick," you know. So I'd go ahead and give her the notes to make, and then when we got home later on, then I would go ahead and type the notes up and then assemble them into the book, you know, at a later period.
I love it. What a great behind-the-scenes story. You know, for her to be able to have that memory as well. And it's like, let me tell you about the writing of this book. Who knew I would be involved? I love it. I love it. You know, but that's a great part of the partnership of the teamwork of a really good spouse. So shout out for her for being able to take those notes down for you. That's awesome. Now, when you were sharing the stories of your life, what were some of the earliest recollections that you chose to share with us in the book?
Oh, okay. See, yeah, the earliest that I remember was about 2-3 months before my third birthday when my brother was born. And, you know, back in those days, they wouldn't let little kids up in the hospital. You had to wait till your little brother or sister came home to see them. So I remember, you know, riding up in the car with my father and parking out on the curb by the hospital and them pushing my mother out in a wheelchair and had my little baby brother all bundled up, but I couldn't see him. And I remember the sun kind of gleaming off the new concrete there, and I was kind of squinting, and I you know, what does he look like? You know, so finally they got her in the car, and you know, and got him all situated, but I still couldn't see him because he's all bundled up in a blanket there, and yeah, so I stood up and I turned around just as, you know, as my father's starting to pull away. And I'm jumping up and down because I'm kind of short, you know, being less than 3, and I'm trying to look over the top of the car seat there to see them. And I'm sure they were saying something to me, but I was ignoring it. And then all of a sudden, my foot came down on the door handle. The door flew open, and I fell out on my head. And I remember you know, fortunately we're only going a couple miles an hour. But I remember my mother screaming and my father hollering something. But I remember jumping up like a jack-in-the-box because I thought, man, it's a long ways home. I'm not going to be stuck here. And so I ran back to the car. I don't remember what they told me, but I do remember that I sat very quietly and very still all the way home.
I can't imagine. What a ride. What a ride. Oh my goodness. You know, it is little things like that I just love stories like that, because by and large, we're not going to have stories like that nowadays, just because of the differences in how we're able to bring our kids home. You know, my mother told me the story of, you know, when we brought you home from the hospital, there were no requirements for car seats. I held you, you know, in my arms, and we did the very traditional slow but steady. You know, Dad drove the car home, Mom sat in the back seat and tried to be nice and safe, you know, and that was it. Nowadays we have car seats and all of these carrier things and all of that we must have. I know with my own children, we have to have a car seat in order to bring them home. So I love those little stories that nowadays the kids would go, no way that happened. But it's like, yes, okay. That definitely happened. I love it. I love it. Now, for someone who decides that they are going to purchase a copy of the book, do you suggest to them that they read it cover to cover? Or can they simply open up the book and start reading wherever the page opens to?
I'm sorry, with my hearing problem, I kind of missed a little bit of that last right there.
That's okay. When reading the book, do you suggest that the reader, read it from cover to cover, or can they just pick a chapter and start reading? How do you suggest they read the book?
Okay. I would kind of read it cover to cover, because once you get past the very first part of the book, then it's in kind of chronological order, you know, until shortly after I retired. Although the way the book is set up, you can jump around if you want to, but I personally would read it cover to cover.
And I would listen to that. If the author tells you to read it from cover to cover, you want to get the best bang out of the book, we'll definitely read it from cover to cover. Well, Ken, it is time for us to go to break, but before we do, I'm going to ask 3 things of you. If you could remind everyone of the title of your book, let them know where they can pick up a copy, and if someone wants to reach out to you, what is the best way to get in contact with you?
Oh, okay. Okay, my book is An Ordinary Guy. Make sure you put my name in there, Ken Holly. If you go to like Amazon or one of the other bookstore websites and you go searching for it, Amazon seems to have the best deal, whether you get it electronically or you get a printed version. And you can go to my website, get in touch with me, but I'm going to go ahead and give you one of my personal emails that they could get in touch with me, and that would be firecracker77099 So that's firecracker77099 @yahoo.com.
Alrighty, listeners. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Tester. My guest today is Ken Holly, and we're talking about his book, An Ordinary Guy. Now, Ken, I love the stories that people share, and especially the funny ones that are about their lives. But we're able to learn a lesson, we're entertained, but we're also getting a lesson out of that. So my next question for you is what was it like for you growing up in the 50s and 60s?
Okay, I probably had kind of a unique growing up here. Our block in the neighborhood had a very high percentage of World War II veterans. Even my mother and our scout leader's wife, a few houses down, were ex-Army nurses. So consequently, it was a sheltered life, compared to what some kids have today. Everybody helped each other, and we watched out for each other. And I remember a lot of the parents would socialize together, and those kids would play together. I remember there was no gangs, drugs, graffiti, litter, vandalism, etc. In the neighborhood like you see in some neighborhoods today. And I remember my mother used to tell us kids that she had eyes in the back of her head, which was the neighbors informing her of our transgressions. And most of the boys belonged to the Boy Scouts, and a lot of the girls belonged to the Girl Scouts. And most of the families went to church on a regular basis, and there was only one single parent family on the block. But I do remember that, none of us had much money, at that time period there. So as kids learned, well, if you want some money, to do something, you're going to have to get out and figure out a way to earn it. So I remember I tried yards for a while, but then my brother and I kind of lucked out, and that we picked up two paper routes that happened to be side by side, at age 10. And, so that's how we got our spending money back then. But hardly nobody had a TV, I remember, until about the mid to late 50s. And I remember most of the time, us boys, we would be out riding our bikes, and we'd be down at the local bayou, scouting around down there, and we'd be swimming and playing football and baseball in the local park. I remember taking our BB guns down to the bayou there, and we'd go explore. And at that time, the bayou was all overgrown, kind of snaky and everything. And, today it's all manicured and looks real nice. But one thing we discovered was the storm drains would empty into the bayou. So we had to go up into the storm drains and explore them. It was kind of interesting, some of the things you would find in storm drains. And I remember we used to play cowboys and Indians, and so we would make our own bows and arrows out of tree limbs and spears and stuff, and we just have a lot of fun. And one of the things that I used to like to do a lot was climb trees. I just love climbing trees. Well, one time I fell out. I was part way up a tree, and I fell out of the tree. And I remember landing on a limb about 4 or 5 feet off the ground across my stomach there. And I still remember that limb slowly bending and sliding off on the ground. I had the wind knocked out of me and couldn't move for a little while. And I had a big black blue bruise across my stomach. And but I instinctively knew that I had to climb again. So the next day, I climbed up on the roof of our house, and would you believe I fell off the roof? Oh my God. But so anyway, after then, I started having these nightmares at night. I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I would be falling in this bottomless pit and just falling and falling and falling and never hitting bottom. And the nightmares eventually subsided, but the fear of heights has never really gone away. Another thing that I remember is that we all had a chore list. All us kids, including some of my buddies, had a chore list. It included our school homework that had to be done, and we had to have our chore list done before we could play. And another thing that I remember is my father used to have little talks with us every once in a while with those kids. And I remember him lining us up for one time, and he said he wanted to talk to us about respect for people and property. And I remember him looking at us and told us that we were to treat everyone, and he reiterated, everyone, as a gentleman or a lady until they prove otherwise, and then treat them appropriately. So I asked him, how do I treat them then if I find out they're not so good people? And he said, well, you'll know then how to treat them. And remember, those were the days in the 50s with the separate drinking fountains. And my brother and I had our paper out, and we used to ride our balloon tire bikes to school every day. And then we'd ride home, get a little snack, then we'd ride back to where the papers were. We'd roll up the papers and put the string around it and take the papers out and deliver them and stuff. But we used to ride at least 10 miles a day. Back in those days, we were real skinny. So I guess I could see why with all that running around there and all that biking and stuff. But you know, something I was thinking about a number of years ago. Something triggered a memory on that. And I remember thinking that we were always taught what was right and what was wrong at home, school, church, and the Scouts. And I've got to thinking, how many kids have that advantage today that have so many people trying to teach them, the things to do and the things not to do. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I remember thinking it was really a good time to grow up for us and for our buddies in the neighborhood there.
You're right. I think that society has changed just a bit in that some children have lost that sense of innocence of just being a child. I've even said to my parents, thank you for letting me be a kid when I was a kid and just enjoy those childhood things that you can't go back to that, of your life.
That's right.
You are definitely right about that. Now, one of the things that you talk about or that you mention in the book is something that sounds like it could be a ghost or a ghost experience. Am I understanding that correctly? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, two incidences come into mind. I had a number more, but a few more, but two of them that I really remember. The first one was my wife's maternal grandmother passed away about 1991 in a nursing home in a small town a couple-hour drive from Houston. And my wife and I were almost the only grandkids that came to visit her. And we would always stop in town and pick up a fried chicken lunch for her because she just loved fried chicken. And she would always sit on the porch with us and eat the whole chicken lunch, even if she had just had lunch inside the nursing home. Anyway, about a month after she passed, the one night there, all the girls were sleeping and I had gone to bed late. But just as I was turning the bedside lamp out, I heard Sarah, our older daughter's door open, and I could hear the light footsteps. And you know how at night the sound is kind of amplified. And then I saw the form come up and look in Rebecca, our younger daughter's bedroom, and she was only about a year old at the time, and then turned and look at us. I couldn't see her face, but she was about the same height as our older daughter, Sarah. And so I spoke up, Sarah. I didn't get an answer. And I said, Sarah, answer me. Still no answer. And so then I I flung off the covers, grabbed my flashlight by the bed, and I leaped out of bed. And I look up, and she's gone. I run out in the hallway. I look in Rebecca's bedroom. I run down the hall, and Sarah's bedroom door is closed, and she's sleeping in her room. I run around the whole house, and I don't see a thing. By that time, my wife, Pat, had wakened up, so I told her what happened. The next morning, Pat tells her mother, and her mother said, "Oh, that was Grandma. That was her mother's mother that was saying goodbye to us before she moved on." So she didn't want to, Pat's mother didn't want to tell us that her mother had been appearing to her 2 or 3 times a week, as she had felt guilty for not visiting her mother very often in the nursing home there. Another incident that happened, I had worked late the one night, and my wife Pat and the girls were over her mother's house, and I told them, well, I'm going to stop at this Taco Bell that's about 3 blocks from the house and just pick us up something to eat. And so when I went there, instead of going through the drive-thru, I parked off to the side where there was nobody on that side of the parking lot. Went inside, got my food, came out. Just as I'm getting in the car, I see these legs run across the hood of the car that had black pants on and white sneakers. You know, what? You know, I jump out of the car and I look around. There's nobody around. I got my flashlight out and I looked on the hood. There's no footprints on the hood. And said, man, that kind of spooked me. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, I said, whoa, man. So I drove home. I was only about 3 blocks from home. And so I drove home about half speed. And I got up to the first intersection where I took a right, and the street light was out. So it was kind of dark right there. And as I started turning, all of a sudden this black guy in dark jeans and white sneakers stopped in front of me and threw his arms out, and he was obviously really surprised that I was there. And then he very quickly turned around and ran off. And after he ran off, I thought, man, if I had been going regular speed, I would have run right over him. Yeah. And so was that his guardian angel or my guardian angel warning me? But I feel like it was a warning there, and it saved his life.
Yeah.
And
absolutely. Because I think that so many times we, just as human beings, we're not paying attention to our surroundings. And you're right. You know that is a God moment in that moment, because it's like, whoa! You look up and you're like, excuse me, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do that. But it's like out of nowhere that will happen. So yeah, I am so glad that both of your guardian angels were working overtime and on that particular case. Wow, what great stories that you have been able to share. Well, Jen, it is time for us to go to break one more time, but before we do, can you remind everyone again, what is the title of your book, and where can we get a copy, and how can we stay in contact with you?
Okay, the title of my book is An Ordinary Guy, and if you do a search on the internet, put my name with it, Ken Holly, An Ordinary Guy by Ken Holly. And you could buy it at any one of the major bookstores, and you could get it off of Amazon. I think Amazon has the better deal. You could get it in electronic or print form. And I'll give you one of my personal emails, which is firecracker77099@yahoo.com. That's firecracker77099@yahoo.com.
Righty listeners, now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And have with me here today on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. You know who I am. My guest today is Ken Holly, and we're talking about his book, An Ordinary Guy. And of course, you can pick up a copy on Amazon or where books are sold. Now, Ken, one of the things that you mentioned is that you spent time in the U.S. Navy. Thank you so much for your service. Now, as a child of the baby boomer generation, as my mom is a boomer, we have these wonderful stories that of how everyone kind of stuck together during that time period, the lessons that were learned, and the wisdom that was passed on to your generation. Can you tell us a little bit about your Navy experience as far as how has that helped you be the person that you are today?
Oh, okay. When I joined the Navy, I found out, talking to the guys in boot camp, that a lot of us really didn't know what we wanted to do, with our lives. And so probably one of the main things that the Navy helped me with was to get my start in electronics and gave me experience, to go along with the training there. Along with that, I got to travel to a few areas, in the country that I had never been to before. Anyway, I was ATN2, aviation electronic tech. I worked on radios and navigation equipment. I worked on the radios for the control tower in North Island, San Diego. I went to school in Millington, Tennessee. I worked on the radios and the jet trainers in Meridian, Mississippi. And I doubled as a radioman and fixed the radios and navigation equipment in VW4, the Hurricane Hunters out of Jacksonville, Florida. Probably my two favorite duty stations out of all those was in North Island in San Diego and flying in the Weather Squadron out of Jacksonville, Florida there. In San Diego, my two buddies, Tom and Davey, and I got to explore Southern California a lot when we were off duty, and Davey and I met a couple girls who worked at Disneyland who gave us free tickets to get into Disneyland multiple times. The girls also invited us to a Thanksgiving lunch in 1967. We were really grateful for that because it was our first time away from home at Thanksgiving. Around Christmas time that year also, we went to a Bob Hope show on one of the aircraft carriers on North Island, and we really, really enjoyed the show, and we really appreciated everything that Bob Hope did, for the guys and the gals there. And now in VW4 out of Jacksonville, I only got to fly about 9 months before my term ended, my active duty ended for the Navy there. So I ended up flying the winter storms in the North Atlantic outside of England and the North Sea. And we used to fly up there, then we would come back and stay at one of the military bases on the East Coast. And since our days were long, our days used to start about 2 o'clock in the morning when we would start pre-flighting the plane. By the time we got back and took care of things, it was maybe about midnight. So it was a long day, and we always got the next day off if the Air Force was able to fly the next day. So the next day we would go play tourists. There's 2 radio men and 2 radar techs on the plane, and so we would rent a car and we would go play tourist. And to us, it was a lot of fun, going around and doing that. In Meridian, Mississippi, in the jet training squadron, I was a shift supervisor on one shift and then an assistant supervisor on the day shift. And it was my job on both shifts there to verify that the guys did the repairs correctly and which almost all the problems were with the radios. I'd have to run out and double check their work and then come back and stamp the repair orders and certify that the repair is done correctly. But at any particular time, we had over 100 jet trainers out there. At any particular time, we had at least a dozen that were taxiing in and out because the squadron was just really cranking out pilots for Vietnam at that time. We had almost we worked 6 days a week. And so it was, we had 3 shifts going 6 days a week. So it was a lot of work. It was really cold out there during the winter too, running around. But that's where I, got the start of my hearing loss was out there running around because we had almost no ear protection. Nowadays they're more aware of that and give the guys good ear protection. But anyway.
That is so true how, like I said, I love how most people are able to learn the lesson, and you're right. I think now they have realized that there needed to be better protection for our guys out there working in the yard. That is amazing. And I love to hear these stories because it makes what you learn in the book come alive. History can be boring to some people if they don't know how they are connected. I am one of many families out there that is quite blessed to be able to trace back their bloodlines quite a ways, even from to England and whatnot, and to be able to have those people that are a part of historic facts, and to say this is my great grandfather to whatever number, or this is my great uncle to whatever number, or this is my grandfather. It really changes things. Being able to see like the draft cards, or to be able to see their service papers, that is really a beautiful thing. So, with all that you have been able to experience with your service record, and with everything that has gone on in the world, how has your faith been able to assist you in being the adult person that you are today?
Well, my faith has helped me a lot. I always feel that that no matter what, that God's with me and He's going to help me through anything. And I remember that I used to pray a lot, and I was always thankful for what I had at the time, and I always prayed for help all the time. I remember because you have all kind of problems, through life as you're going through life. But and I had problems at work because customers would have problems, and I'd have to figure out what their problems are. And I remember I was really amazed as to how many times when I had problems and I would say a little silent prayer asking for help with this problem, and the solution to the problem would just kind of pop into my head. It was kind of weird and kind of amazing how many times that happened in my life, and I always felt that no matter what, no matter how difficult it may be at the time, that God will never give me any more than I could handle, and He'll always be there with me through this, and so that my faith always helped me a lot, with that.
I love it, and you are so right. I love how God has those moments with us, and we can say a silent prayer, and He will give us the answer, and it just comes to us, and I love that he does it like that we don't have to, roll it around, we don't have to figure it out, but he simply gives us a clear and definite answer, and it's awesome to know that God is with us in those moments. You are so right. Well, Ken, Holly, thank you so much for spending time with me here on Daily Spark today. I have so enjoyed listening to you tell us about your book and about sharing your stories, and I definitely encourage everyone to get a copy of your book. Thank you so much for spending time with me here today.
And thank you, Doctor, for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And listeners, of course, we are so grateful that you spent time with me here today as well. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to spend it here with me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. As always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone.